You are a lone indie musician just trying to forge your own path in the world. You don't have a lot of fans, fame, or fortune yet, so you do your best to get by, just writing music for yourself and throwing it out into the world in the hopes that someone, just anyone, cares. And then, who's that? Your first fan? Someone saw your music and liked it. Already you feel invigorated. Everything feels right in the world for a while, until eventually you start holding concerts. Now you've hit it big. There are fans who are eagerly awaiting your new releases, and you're so high you could touch the sky. Of course, there's also the haters, the Debbie Downers, the ones that want to watch you slip up and fail. But you're inspiring so many people in spite of their hatred. By endgame, you're so powerful, so influential, that you can do just about anything. Your concerts always sell out, your big singles never fail to impress. And then, you win. You've made it so big now, but you couldn't have done it without the love and support of your adoring fans. Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Sentra, someone who likes to talk about gameplay design, and my topic of choice today is Seraphine, the starry-eyed songstress. Seraphine released in October of 2020, a little under 5 years ago, and I wanted to dedicate this video to her because I think her gameplay design is an interesting story that has been overshadowed by the drama of her release. I, and a lot of players, including close friends of mine, really love this champion, and I knew that I'd put a lot of heart into a video about her. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so as mentioned previously, Seraphine got a lot of flack at her release, but not because of her gameplay design. There was tons of drama around her Twitter account, her collab with KDA followed by her release day ultimate skin, which was more like a skin bundle, and people also claimed that she was evil because of one sentence in her lore, and that stirred even more drama and yada yada yada. I'm not here to talk about any of that. There are already dozens, hundreds, nay, countless videos, Reddit posts, and so on, talking about that side of Seraphine. I am focusing on her release as a playable champion in League of Legends, looking at things like the intention behind her kit's design, her balance history, and her relationship with the developers and player base. First, let's start with Seraphine's narrative to see what kind of theme that her gameplay should try to match. Seraphine was born to two Zaunite parents who had moved to Piltover together in pursuit of a better life. She loved music, specifically the music that people sang together, but at a young age, she discovered an ability of hers that made life very hard for her. Every person has a song inside of them, one that they might not want others to hear, and want to or not, Seraphine heard them. All of them. All at the same time, all on their own tempos, lyrics, and moods. In crowded streets, it drove Seraphine mad. So, her parents scraped together whatever savings that they could to buy a Hextech crystal and used it to make a device that quieted the voices. To their own surprise, however, Seraphine had discovered a new voice that she had never heard before. The Hextech crystal itself. It gave her guidance and wisdom, and it inspired her to try and use her ability, which she thought was a curse upon her, to resonate with the crowd and sing their songs with them. The more that she practiced, the less she relied on the sound dampener to get through her day-to-day life. After learning so much from the Piltover crowd that she grew up with, she realized that it didn't seem to complete her. She drew massive crowds of them now, but there was still some perspective missing, so she rode the ferry down to Zaun to find a different crowd, and she was immediately hit with something new and different. A sense of freedom, but also fear. So many Zaunites lived their life in fear, and their soul songs reflected that. She wanted to be a uniting force for Piltover and Zaun, a spark of joy for the Twin Cities. So she went back to her parents and convinced them to use her Hextech crystal for something different. They dismantled the sound dampener and converted it into a soul song amplifier, letting Seraphine hear people's soul songs more clearly and sing them back with even more zeal. Making it big in both Piltover and Zaun allowed her to unite them in the crowd, to put aside their differences and listen to her sing their song together in harmony. I want you to look at this story in a light outside of the Runeterra universe for a moment. Ignore the lore implications of the soul and the crystal and the canonization of Arcane for a moment, and just focus on the general themes and goals of this character. Much like the last character that I reviewed, Seraphine isn't a fighter. She has a magical superpower, but it doesn't innately have combat capabilities. So what do we do? Well, she's a musician, a singer specifically. Her power is involved with the music that's born inside of everyone, so she is closely interlinked with other people. Both of those are things that we can tie into her gameplay design when thinking of how she can resonate with her thematic. Let's take a look at her abilities in game, because I think they translate this story into a great champion. Oh, but first, let's clear up a misconception really quickly.
With the help of her teammates, Seraphine takes the stage as a melodic mid-lane mage with massive potential.
Okay, a lot of people have been under the assumption that she was designed to be a support, and I just thought I'd lead with this. At present, she is a support champion, but she was marketed as and designed to be a mid laner. Going along with the champion spotlight, it's wisest to start at Seraphine's Q, High Note. Seraphine lobs her projectile that blooms out in an AoE when it hits the ground, dealing damage to all enemies that it touches. The damage increases by a significant amount based on the enemy's missing health. It's her bread and butter damage tool, best for following up on an ally engage when they've softened the enemy up, good for finishing your combo, and solid for poke and wave clear. Seraphine's W is Surround Sound. She and all allies without a very generous AoE get a shield and a burst of movement speed. If Seraphine already has a shield on her, she also heals allies after a short delay. The heal is very small, but scales with ally missing health and reapplies for every ally within Surround Sound's radius. One of my good Seraphine playing friends has dubbed this ability the Circle of Happiness, which she enjoys telling people to get into very aggressively when they try to run off somewhere so that she can maximize the heal value. Seraphine's E, Beat Drop, is a skill shot slow that pierces all enemies hit, dealing damage. If the enemy it hits is already slowed, they will be rooted instead. If they are already immobilized or hit with a hard CC, like a charm or a stun, they will become stunned instead. Most mages have some CC or another in their basic toolkit, and this is Seraphine's, with a focus on making it phenomenal at following up on CCs and being a good chain stun tool. It's pretty bad at just catching someone out offensively since it doesn't move very fast, although it's fine for disengage, getting better at it with her passive, or rather, one of her passives. Seraphine has two passives. The first passive is Echo. When Seraphine casts spells, she gets stacks of Echo. Once she has 2 stacks, her next non-ultimate spell that she casts consumes the Echo stacks to cast the chosen spell a second time. So, you want to root someone with Beat Drop, but you don't have an ally? Just stack your passive and cast it twice. Now the first hit slows the enemy for you, so the next one is a root. High Note gets much more raw damage if it hits the same target twice, since they'll be missing some health after the first hit. And of course, if you need to heal your team, but don't have an ally that can shield you, just double cast Surround Sound for the heal. Echo is a very powerful mage passive that gives Seraphine a high base level of value in her spells, as well as an opportunity for some decision making to keep things interesting. Seraphine also has a second passive called Harmony. When Seraphine casts a spell, she and all allies within a huge range get a note applied to them. This note isn't supposed to do anything for allies specifically, but when Seraphine auto-attacks, it gets increased range and sends all the notes that she's collected flying at the target, dealing little ticks of bonus damage. It's definitely a bit strange that they gave her a passive that looks like she's buffing her allies when it doesn't do that, but there is reasoning behind it, which I'll get into after I finish explaining her kit. Seraphine's ultimate is Encore. Seraphine sends out a super wide skill shot that pierces enemies, damaging and charming all enemies hit. Any time that it hits a champion, be they ally or enemy, its range resets, extending further and further. This ultimate is incredibly powerful and defines Seraphine's teamfighting identity. She stands in the backlines of her team, but not too far away, waiting for an ally to make a big engage, and then, when the enemies attempt to dogpile them, Seraphine makes waves through the crowd, giving her allies an encore they'll never forget. Then, she chains the stun with a Beat Drop and hits that high note. Let's go over Seraphine's main thematic points again. She is a musician, with music being something of a power source for her, and she loves people. She loves bringing people together and giving the people she meets a song that feels personally inspiring and helpful to them. This sounds a lot like a supports kit, but you can have supportive tools and not be a support. Instead, Seraphine both encourages her teammates to come to her, being able to follow up on an ally's actions very reliably, and at the same time, she literally brings enemies together with an AoE charm. She then uses the fact that everyone is grouped up to hit as many enemies as possible with big AoE spells. This accomplishes a few things in Seraphine's gameplay design. For one, it differentiates her from another musical magic user in the game, Sona, both in how she feels to play and in what they both give to their team. Seraphine is bringing more damage on her own and some big wombo combo synergy, which is different from Sona making all of her teammates a lot harder to kill and giving them enchanter item buffs. Additionally, it's a successful formula for a fun and satisfying gameplay loop, giving Seraphine players some very satisfying and engaging high moments to keep them hooked on the champion. This is the first champion I've talked about where I was actually around to witness their release, and I can safely say that launch day Seraphine felt incredibly good to play even though I usually don't like mages, because she felt like a champion designed for real team play. There's a real satisfaction behind seeing an ally land a slow or a root and tossing out an E to follow up. There's a joy in saving a teammate, or several, from a would-be fatal engage with surround sound, and following up on a big engage by giving them an encore. Jeevan Sidhu, also known as Riot Jag, is one of the senior game designers for Riot Games and Seraphine's gameplay designer, and on Seraphine's Champion Insights, Jag seems to support my views here. Quote, "I was working on Seraphine at a time where I thought everyone hated each other when they played League. It seemed like people resented that League was a team game. I'd see posts on social media from players who hated having to play with their teammates. I really wanted Seraphine's design to almost try to tackle that problem. I really wanted players who played Seraphine, or played with Seraphine, to remember that team games are fun and that everyone likes playing with friends." End quote. I think this is why she has her notes passive. It was a visual indicator to her teammates that they're close enough for Seraphine to help them, and it also showed them that they're contributing to Seraphine's success, and Seraphine is contributing back. All of her abilities get stronger with friends, and it makes team fights with Seraphine, both as Seraphine herself and as Seraphine's allies, a very fun time. Seraphine is a special type of character that I like to call a utility carry, meaning that she has useful supportive tools for a carry champion, but still wants gold and others supporting her to realize her full potential. Think champions like Ashe, Senna ADC, and Kayle. These are some of my favorite characters to play as, but they usually come with some role identity conflict and big balance issues, and Seraphine was no exception. She was insanely overpowered at launch, and very intuitive to play right from the get-go. You see, she was good if you played her mid lane, and being her designed role, I think it was also her most enjoyable lane. If you'll entertain my little story from the start of this video, the story of becoming the starry-eyed songstress, if you give in to the LARP, mid is all that you'd play her as, but unfortunately, mid lane was balanced around having strengths as well as weaknesses. You know, like a well-designed champion. If you're a tryhard who wants all the power of her crazy strong kit and none of the downsides, just take her bot lane to the ADC role where all of her weaknesses are covered by the nature of having a support with you. I mean seriously, think about it. You have a teammate who is at least passively giving you more notes to pop and doing some chip damage to make your Q stronger. Then, most every support in existence has at least a slow to power up your E, and after that, you could play her with all kinds of supports to power up different things. You can play her with another mage to maximize poke damage and hard CC so that her E's and her Q's really pop. You could play her with an enchanter to shield her and get some easy healing on her W, or you could play her with an engage tank for lots of hard CC to chain and play as a target to bounce her ult. It's up to you really, but Seraphine ADC really worked and it shined through in her astonishingly high win rate. Or you could be like the majority of players who saw all of these possibilities, design decisions, and player optimizations, opt to use none of it, and player support. I don't get it. I just don't get it. People were so drawn to Seraphine support before she even launched, and for what? So that you can starve yourself of the gold that you need, build enchanter items for your 26-second cooldown shield, that you max last, play lane with a marksman that gives 0 benefits to your abilities, and furthermore, take up the support slot in your team comp, which could have been a champion that actually helps you, like a tank or a real enchanter, something, anything. I think what upsets me the most is that it was genuinely her weakest lane, but enchanter build still worked really well regardless of the role you played, and her player base still kept spamming her support. Is it to dodge the mid lane queues? Anyway, in all seriousness, I'm not out here to demonize or vilify her player base. To be honest, it's not a fault of theirs at all. Some of them really just enjoyed playing her in the support role, and that's fine. Others also stood by how strong that she was with the new enchanter items, Moonstone Renewer and Staff of Flowing Water, which came out with the Mythic items update just one patch after her release. In fact, Enchanter became her strongest known build at the time despite being a mage by design, putting something of a spotlight on her support presence even though Enchanter could be built anywhere. It's honestly a bit fishy. She has a big shield and heal, yes, but it's on such a long cooldown. I would expect that Enchantress Seraphine would have some trouble with keeping those support items up consistently, but well, it worked anyway, I guess. Now, I've given a lot to chew on already in regards to her release version, so let's take a trip through the patch notes to see some of the highlights. One patch after her release, Seraphine got some role-affirming surgery to try and incentivize players to take her mid lane, making her Q AP ratio scale with rank and her passive AP ratio scale directly with levels, as well as making E better for clearing minions early on and nerfing its damage to compensate. We have even more role affirmation here in patch 10.25, where surround sound now gives more shields to Seraphine than her allies, making it a better self-peel tool. In my opinion, it's very clear from these two changes that Seraphine was being taken out of mid lane by a lot of players, and the devs wanted to better encourage her mid. She had an astonishingly high win rate as a bot carry, and lower and mid-ranking players preferred to play her support over mid lane most of the time. Now, let's see, we have a bug fix, some nerfs, more nerfs, and... Oh. It all makes sense now. For context, Moonstorm Renewer was effectively a very different and very buggy item back when it was new, so let me tell you the significance of this. Moonstorm Renewer's passive, Starlit Grace, used to apply a heal to an ally every time that you affected a champion with an ability, with a 2-second internal cooldown. Before this patch, Seraphine's passive notes counted as affecting an ally with an ability, meaning that she could cast any spell, it could miss, it didn't matter if it hit or not, and as long as an ally was nearby, she still got notes, and thus got a heal from Moonstone. This heal could also proc enchanter items, making Seraphine's enchanter item uptime much more frequent than it was ever intended to be, and that's what made Enchanter Seraphine such a strong build. Honestly, it may only be a bug fix, but I would classify this as a major balance change, because Enchanter Seraphine's viability nosedived after this change. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of Seraphine players got duped into thinking she was good support because of this bug. If it were patched sooner, she may not have had such a big support player base. Anyway, back to the patches. The next most significant patch note is on 12.5, which is the first time we see Riot dedicatedly buff Seraphine's support. Surround Sound's mana cost and cooldown both got reduced, making it cheaper and come up faster. Both the shield and the heal now scale with the ability's rank, when before the shield scaled off of Seraphine's level and the heal didn't scale on levels at all. And the shield also has a higher AP ratio. To compensate though, the AP ratio on the heal was nerfed, and Seraphine no longer gives herself a bigger shield. The developer comment on this isn't much more than flavor text saying, "We're buffing Sera's support and trying not to change mid," so I'll skip it. What else is there? 12.12 saw a change to beat drop, where if it rooted or stunned its target, it lasted slightly longer. And moreover, its cooldown got flattened to 10 seconds at all ranks of the ability. Seems like another change directed at Seraphine's support to save her from the crisis of all of her abilities needing to be maxed, but as a support, not having the experience to do so. Then, we have patch 13.21, which was a massive changelog and an even bigger developer note to boot with it. There's a bunch of base stat changes which I'm not reading out, but just know that it focuses mainly on making mana regeneration an important stat for her to buy, alongside a buff to her armor. Next, High Note's AP ratio is now a 50% AP ratio flat instead of it scaling with ability rank. It also has a slightly lower cooldown at early ranks, and somewhat more base damage at late ranks. Surround Sound has a steeper mana cost, but its cooldown gets a lot lower with the ability's level now. Additionally, the base shield value is higher, but the healing was nerfed drastically, still scaling with ability level but having a significantly lower base heal and no longer scaling off of her AP at all. Finally, Beat Drop has a cheaper mana cost and better base damage at high ability levels. Overall, I really can't put a pulse on the goal of these changes. Maybe the developer essay will give some insights. Quote, "Despite initially creating her as a mid laner, players have overwhelmingly spoken via Champion Select that they enjoy Seraphine support as her primary playstyle, despite it not being very strong by the numbers. With her current tuning, we can't buff her, as bot lane AP carry Seraphine is about as strong as we're comfortable with. This patch, we're attempting to bring AP carry, support, and mid Seraphine closer together in power. Our goal is to allow all of her builds to be strong and express their strengths in different ways. As always, if we overshoot our changes, we'll walk some back next patch. We've got a few changes here. First, we're aligning her base stats to those of other enchanters, which means having an early reliance on mana regeneration, which encourages her to pick up Spell Thief's Edge. Oh god, this was back when Spell Thieves existed, I feel old. And other similar support items. By shifting her durability from health into armor, she synergizes better with her own shields and other enchanter items that Seraphine commonly buys, like Echoes of Helia. Second, we're moving her power budget away from AP ratios and into base power, as supports get less gold than other roles. More reliable base damage tends to help them out a lot. By reducing her cooldowns, she'll also apply enchanter items like Echoes of Helia and Ardent Censer more reliably. Third, we're reallocating some power towards solo lane specific areas and away from grouped up power. Significantly buffing E's rank up makes late levels grant more damage. W's heal, which not only heals each champion in the area but ramps its heal based on the number of nearby champions, is receiving a nerf, which disproportionately affects lanes where she's grouped. The end result we're aiming for is a Seraphine that is a strong support and bot laner, with those as her primary roles, since that's where most players want to play her. That said, we also have some changes aimed at retaining some of her mid lane power for the small but dedicated player base that wants to continue to play her there." End quote. Okay, what the devs are trying to say here is that Seraphine has an identity crisis. ADC is her strongest role and cannot stand to get any stronger, but her players mostly want her to be played support, and the devs want her to be viable mid. However, you can't buff for both of those roles without also buffing for ADC, which is already way too strong. So they just couldn't really do anything. A lot of these changes seem to contradict each other in some way or another. They want support to be stronger, but nerfed her heal and made maxing her skills more important for base damage. They want solo lane Sarah to be better, but made the gold that she gets less value with her lower QAP ratio and cut the AP ratio on her heal. Overall, they want Seraphine players to get what they want, and they want her to be a support, but they just don't have the means to get there. Especially since Seraphine was not designed for the support role in the first place. Looking forward to patch 14.5, we have a mid-scope update for Seraphine, and it is a doozy. First, some more base stat changes, including upping her base speed by 5. Her empowered attack nodes have lower base damage and a lower AP scaling, but now scale linearly off of her levels, not spiking at specific ones. High Note got a lot of changes. It travels a little faster, has a shorter cooldown and lower mana cost at low ranks, overall higher base damage, and it gets even stronger at hitting low health enemy champions. But its cooldown and mana costs are both worst at higher ability ranks, and its missing health damage amp no longer works against minions. Surround Sound has a much shorter cooldown at low ranks, but a somewhat longer cooldown at max rank. It has an overall cheaper mana cost, and the shield base value is slightly higher, but the movement speed boost does not scale as well with AP as it used to. Beat Drop's cooldown now scales with ability level again. Its mana cost no longer increases with rank, making it significantly cheaper. Its AP ratio got increased, the slow duration now scales with rank, and it now deals reduced damage to minions. Finally, we have Encore, which got its AP ratio cut down and its cooldown doesn't go down as much with ability level. Let's read the dev note together now, shall we? Quote, "The vast majority of Seraphine's player base is in support, where she's currently critically weak. Typically, we just buff her, but she's also significantly overpowered as a bot lane AP carry, which means simpler tactics aren't available. So, we're trying again to close the gap between these roles while being mindful of what players find fun about her in each playstyle. For APC Seraphine, we're playing up for repeated damage. Q's missile speed and execute damage against champions has gone up, and E is now worthy of maxing over W with a better AP ratio to boot. As compensation, she's losing a lot of power against minions and a bit of top-end ultimate power. For support Seraphine, we're embracing her various builds. There's a logical case for every conceivable skill order, and we're trying to make those choices viable based upon what game you're facing. Want to be primarily about shielding? It should be equally viable to max Q or E. Want to cosplay as a full mage and just deal as much damage as possible? Go right ahead, we think that option should also be supported. We're also delivering some small support skewed changes, like shifting her mana towards regeneration, which synergizes with the support item, plus some base movement speed, which is more important to a more roam-centric role." End quote. Okay, normally I give the devs the benefit of a doubt when it comes to designing and balancing champions, but if the last big patch was confused about how to change Seraphine already, this one was a total miss. Let me take you along my train of thought here for a moment. In order to put more power into what makes Seraphine a support, Riot had to peel away somewhat at her damaging properties. That means doing something about her passive notes and her Q, both abilities in her kit that exclusively do direct damage. They are carry tools, they help her farm and get kills, and they have absolutely zero supportive qualities whatsoever. They dedicated her to a midscope update, which is big enough to change the properties of abilities. We've seen it before with, for example, Ahri. Ahri's dashes now get resets when she scores a takedown. That's new. That wasn't there before. But because she had a team of people work on changing her, they had the bandwidth to change the ability to fit a new vision for her. Syndra is an even bigger example of this, getting a completely new passive and some new properties on her abilities. Seraphine's midscope had the chance to adjust her power budget, maybe taking some of the utility from surround sound away and putting it into Q to give it a more supportive quality, or make her notes an ally enchantment. But they didn't. Instead, they just gutted its ability scaling to discourage maxing it. And sure, now Seraphine supports could just max beat drop and surround sound, but it's going to feel really bad for the Seraphine player to have such a crappy ability now, regardless of her role, and especially if she's expected to compete in the Enchanter slot, because frankly, Enchanters don't do dead abilities. None of them have an ability that only does direct damage. Even Renata Glask passive, which is literally just extra damage, does even more damage when her ally follows up, giving it a supportive quality. Lulu Q is a slow, and she can also direct from where she places picks, which can sometimes be like giving your ally a slow, in a sense. Heck, all of Nami's buttons do damage, but none of them only do damage. She's a support through and through. If Riot wanted to midscope Seraphine, the first thing they had to realize was that she was designed to be a damaging mage carry with supportive skills second. From there, they have a choice. Either lead into a support rework and give her passive and Q something that actually helps her allies, or accept that support players like her even though she's weak, and let her stay as the weak but fun champion that she is and balance her for other lanes. They did neither. The dev note claims that this is an attempt to close the gap between her different roles, but it's worded nicely to hide the fact that that means her carry roles need to be kneecapped to make support look any good by comparison. They saw mid lane's low play rate, and in spite of it being her intended role, they decided
You don't need to be strong.
and gutted her wave clear, which is what made her viable mid. At the same time, they didn't cut out enough damage to make Seraphine APC weaker than support. Made it weaker, but not weaker than support. It is still usually her highest win rate role, but due to its low play rate, it can be pretty swingy on a given patch. It also shows in how dissatisfied that Seraphine players are with the state of the champion right now, even though her support win rate is technically functional. She just doesn't feel as good to play as she used to. Some simple balance changes and bug fixes aside, this is Seraphine as we know her now. So how is she done? My typical here is the good and here is the bad format isn't really going to work here, because to be honest, putting her in a different lane recontextualizes her kit a lot. So instead, I'll analyze her more briefly 4 times. First, I'll mention some things that I think she gets right in a general sense. Then, I'll do a deeper but short breakdown of 3 lanes. First at her intended role mid lane, then I'll do the crowd favorite support, and finally I'll talk about her strongest role, ADC. For what I think Seraphine generally does right, I love how they repurposed her lore and thematic into her gameplay. Making her a true support was the easy route, but making her a damage dealer was far more interesting. It makes her stand out more among the roster, as well as making her very satisfying to use. If I had to dock points for anything though, I think that Seraphine is a pretty low skill ceiling champion and doesn't have a lot to latch onto in terms of mastery. Generally, you see your team start things and then you follow up very reliably. At the same time, a lot of her damage in CC is reactable, so it can be dodged, which makes her good at stomping low elo players that don't dodge, but she can't make her spells hit moving targets that actively anticipate and react to her abilities very consistently. Mid lane, Seraphine has a lot of positives going for her. Her high utility and long range make her good at following up on her junglers or supports plays, which encourages team play, and helps her deal with her low base movement speed that makes roaming long distances on her undesirable. She's also very good in mid and late game team fights, even when behind, which saves her from being a feast or famine champion. At the same time, Mid lane Seraphine has a good deal of counterplay with weaknesses baked into her kit to keep her from getting too crazy. Her spells are pretty slow, which makes them reasonably dodgeable and missable. Her mana costs aren't exactly friendly, so she's prone to going before she can buy tier. Before level 6, she needs her Echo to hard CC anyone, which makes her very easy to dive and kill, sometimes even under turret. Her super low movement speed that I mentioned earlier also means that she can't use that crazy good shoving power to its full potential. This all combines well to offset her very reliable scaling power. That being said, Seraphine is definitely overloaded with utility. Even after her AP ratio nerfs, she still does good damage considering that it's all AoE, and that is concerning given her ability to declare an all-in with W and ult. Moving on to support Seraphine, I have a lot less nice things to say here, but it's not all bad. She has a great deal of build variety that can change up how she feels in a game, and it lets players customize how they want to play. I feel like Enchanter Seraphine builds run the risk of gimping your team out of damage when you're in mid or bot lane, but as a support, you can go your run-of-the-mill Enchanter items like Redemption, Water Staff, Moonstone, Echoes of Helia. You can go mage items like Rylai's, Malignance, Liandry's, and generally play to very different strengths depending on what's needed. This is one of the points that I'll actually give to her mid-scope update, but that's it, nothing else. Now, for flaws, I've already addressed some of them, but let me recap. She has no organic synergy with Marksman. Marksmen usually have very little CC for you to power up Beat Drop. Marksmen don't shield you to get the heal on surround sound. Marksmen don't want to stand in front of you to bounce your ultimate. They also don't like it when you use Q to steal their kills. In general, Seraphine is at odds with Marksmen a lot of the time, which isn't too surprising considering that Marksman players have a negative attitude towards mage supports in general. Also, Seraphine's Q and Note passive have no innate supportive qualities, which makes Enchanter builds somewhat undesirable, but it's what she's expected to get a lot of the time anyway. It makes playing her support kind of frustrating and, in my opinion, not as satisfying. Finally, we have ADC Seraphine, which I've played the most but think the lowest of. Seraphine ADC is very fun and it feels like she gets everything that she wants. Money, support allies, ganks, everything. Of course, like with any mage ADC, you have to think carefully about the damage spread on your team before you pick it, or else the enemy could get Kaenic Rukern and wall your entire team. However, outside of draft phase, Seraphine ADC has very, very little counterplay. She can nuke waves and poke you out at the same time. Hitting a slow skill shot on one laner is not free, but against two laners it's likely you at least hit something. After some AP, she nukes waves pretty fast and from a safe range. She's also way harder to dive as an ADC than in her other roles because she now has a support not only peeling for her, but also empowering her E to root the enemy even when Echo is down. She still scales and teamfights like a god, so you can't rely on good old Marksman scaling to save you either. Overall, if I had a nickel for every video game girly that rode a hoverboard and tried to be good at everything, but instead ended up kind of sucking at a lot of things, I'd have 2 nickels. I've said it once and I'll say it again. The devs need to either commit to making her a support and rework her, or they can accept that her support base will love her and play her even when it's her weakest role, and balance her as a mid laner instead. I think that she's landed at a very unhappy spot in the meta, but is otherwise still a genuinely good, smart, enjoyable, and thematically fitting design. Okay, that's Seraphine done and dusted. I really hope you liked this video and would like to ask that you like, comment, and subscribe. I read the comments and it helps me out a lot as a new creator. In fact, I'm currently pondering some suggestions for who my next champion should be based on some comments I received on my last video. Again, thank you so much for watching. Bye!